our keynote speaker this morning. As you know, Sheryl is Chief Operating Officer at Facebook, where she is responsible for building Facebook's operations globally and managing its sales, marketing, business development, human resources, public policy, and communications functions. Prior to Facebook, Sheryl was Vice President of Global Online Sales and Operations at Google, where she built and managed the online sales channels for advertising, which represents the majority of Google's customers worldwide for both AdWords and AdSense, and also for operations for consumer worldwide. Sheryl has been named one of the 50 most powerful women in business by Fortune, and one of the 50 women to watch by the Wall Street Journal. She serves on the board of directors of Starbucks and has been nominated to the board of directors of Disney. Like all of us in this room, Sheryl understands that with great opportunity comes the responsibility to give back. And she has not only been a force for growth and change in the business community, but has been a leader in sustainable development. Early in her career, Sheryl was an economist with the World Bank, where she looked at the effectiveness of public health programs in India, where leprosy was rampant. Prior to joining Google, she was Chief of Staff for the U.S. Treasury Department under Bill Clinton, where she helped lead the Treasury's work on issues of debt relief to developing countries. While at Google, Sheryl was instrumental in launching Google.org, Google's philanthropic arm, which from inception targeted its philanthropy at the world's largest problems and focused on how more philanthropic giving could reach the world's most disadvantaged more directly. Sheryl serves on the board of directors of a number of not-for-profit groups, including the Brookings Institution, Women for Women International, an organization that provides women survivors of war with the tools and resources to move from crisis and poverty to stability and self-sufficiency, and V-Day, which works to stop violence against women globally and is currently extremely focused on what is going on in the Congo right now. So, I think it's safe to say that Sheryl is a leader who is unafraid to disrupt by innovating, whether as an outstanding executive or a committed philanthropist. Please join me in welcoming Sheryl to the stage.
Thank you. I'm reminded of something Lyndon Johnson used to say when he got a particularly nice introduction. He used to say, "I'm sorry my parents aren't here to hear that. My father would have appreciated it and my mother would have believed it." My parents are here with me tonight, and while I'm fairly certain neither one of them believed it, I bet you they appreciated it, so thank you. So a few weeks ago, I had a chance to hear Shimon Peres speak. And he stood up in front of a room filled with Jews and non-Jews, and he said, "If the Jews have given the world one thing, it is discontent." I come from a good Jewish family. We know something about Jewish discontent. My grandmother, bless her heart, very important woman in my life, she knew something about this. For the last decade, not months, decade of her life, if you said, "Nanny, how are you?" she would look up, make sure everyone was looking, and say, "How should I be?" Jewish discontent goes back before my grandmother. It has its roots in the Bible, in the biblical book of the prophets, a large portion of which is focused on telling the Jews they shouldn't be content in a world that's unjust. And God, since I saw like 3 rabbis in the room, I really hope this is true. In Yom Kippur, we read a chapter or a paragraph from Isaiah, which famously castigates the Jews for fasting while people are still suffering around them. Isaiah says, "Is this the fast I desire, a day for us to starve our bodies? No, rather this is the fast I desire, to unlock the chains of wickedness, untie the cords of the yoke, let the oppressed go free, break off every bond, share your bread with the hungry, and take the poor into your home." Those words were written 2,500 years ago, and as Jews, we are still discontent. We're discontent to live in a world that does not have peace. For our brothers and sisters in Israel, our brothers and sisters throughout the Middle East, and throughout the world, we're discontent that there is not real peace in the world. We're discontent that today, as we sit here eating this beautiful breakfast, 2.7 billion people live on less than $2 a day. That's almost half the world's population. And while it's certainly true that $2 buys more in some parts of the world than others, make no mistake about it, $2 a day buys a life filled with the kind of depravity none of us can imagine. We're discontent that the oppression of women is so widely understood and institutionalized that, once again, as we sit here today, there are 3 million women and girls, some of them are 5 years old, who are sexual slaves. And we're discontent that every single year, in the good years and the bad years, in the boom years and in the years of depression, 6 million people die of malaria, tuberculosis, and AIDS, 3 diseases which are entirely preventable or treatable. The only problem is, as a world, we won't fund their treatment. That number 6 million has particular resonance for us as Jews. We know what that number means. And to see 6 million people die every year, that is something that drives discontent. We also live in a world of unbelievable technology. At Facebook, I'm old, really old. When I got there, I had been there about a month. I'm sitting in a meeting with this guy, Alex, and he's talking about how we're launching a new product. And then he says, and I'm kind of on his left, when we launch this product, we have to think about all of our user demographics, including, and watch my hand here, the middle-aged ones. Well, I'm here, and I'm like, time out, Alex, did you just call me middle-aged? He looks up and he's like, yeah, and he goes right off with his presentation. I am a really nice person, and Alex still works at Facebook. But I remember before I had a computer, and I remember getting a computer, and when personal technology first happened, it sped all of us up. We used to type, then we could word process. We used to use a calculator, we could use Lotus 123. But it was a very individual activity, me, myself, processing more quickly. Then the internet came. And what the internet did is it connected us to each other, and it connected us to information. Now we could see what was going on in the world, but it was actually a pretty anonymous thing. For those of us, and I am old enough to remember, when you first got online, you didn't put your personal identity online. We had AOL chat names and handle names. You wouldn't put your real information. The internet was an anonymous place. And Facebook, our view of the world is that it's evolving. It's evolved from the information web to the social web, to a place where 400 million people, we have 400 million users, put their real identity online. And what that means as people who are looking at the grave issues of the world is that increasingly, we don't just get the information in an anonymous way, we know who the people are. We don't just see Haiti happen on CNN, but we see it on Facebook, where people tell the individual stories. I had a very good Jewish education. I'm proud of that. I think it's made me some of the things I am today. I'm grateful to my parents for insisting that it happen. And I have very distinct memories of studying the Holocaust when I was in Sunday school and then at the Jewish camps I went to. And I sat there as a girl and we asked ourselves the question, what if I had been alive then? If I had been living in Germany or Poland, would I have been one of the brave ones who saved some of the Jews? If I had been living in New York and I had seen that one tiny article we all see which ran on page 12 saying, hey, there might be death camps in Auschwitz, would I have been able to go about my daily life knowing that this was happening somewhere in the world? And as a young girl, I knew I didn't know the answer, but I hoped that I would have been different. As an adult with the wisdom and in some ways the sadness which comes with age, I know I'm not. I know that 6 million people are going to die of preventable and treatable diseases. And I'm here this morning at breakfast, and I'm going to go to Facebook today and spend my day, and then I'm going to have Shabbat dinner with my family, and I am capable of living through my day, as we all are. We're capable of going about our daily lives, maybe because it's too big, maybe because it's too hard, but that's a responsibility we all bear. My childhood question has been answered, and I don't like the answer. I'm in a room of philanthropists. You're all here because you give generously to the world around you, because you care about making the world a better place. I think I'm in a room of mostly Jewish philanthropists, and the word tzedakah charity has a very specific meaning in Judaism. It means the act of making something more just. So since this is the business leaders' breakfast, I want to submit my hypothesis, which is that in order to do better on our philanthropy, we need to be more hard-headed about it. We need to be as tough on ourselves as philanthropists as we are on ourselves as business leaders. We need to take a business approach to philanthropy. I think the great businesses of the world do three things better than their competitors. They are three things that sound really basic and are really hard to do. The first is that they focus on the most critical problems. The second is that they find systemic solutions. And the third is that they build core competence. Number one, focus on the most critical problems. Sounds obvious and easy. Of course, we're going to focus on the most critical problems. But the question of prioritization in business, in my experience, is the hardest thing you have to do when you're trying to help run a company. Lots of ideas come to you. It's actually not so hard to say no to the bad ones or the mediocre ones or the kind of good ones. We're all busy. Our organizations can only do so much. It's saying no to the good ones, the good ideas, the things that would make Facebook more usable, the things that would solve Gary Lauder's bugs he's always pointing out, and I thank him for that. Saying no to those things, that's hard because Gary's right. We need to fix the product the way he's suggesting. Saying no to the things that would really help our users, really serve our mission, really help our customers, because they might be number three, but as a company, we can only do one and two. That's hard. As philanthropists, this is really hard. As individual citizens, this is really hard. There are so many good causes. There are good causes that are close to our homes and close to our hearts. We get asked by people we know. They serve the communities we live in. They serve causes that are obviously so important. But the truly great businesses only do the top of the list. And I submit the truly great philanthropists have to focus there as well. I think the most important thing to do this is to be more honest and open about what is philanthropy and what is charity. We have a tax structure which identifies philanthropy as any check that is written to a nonprofit organization, any organization serving any mission which does not make profits. As we commonly think about charity, we think about solving the world's poor. But I think our tax structure has gotten in our way and confused a lot of us and allowed us to lump charity into that overall philanthropic bucket. Individual donations are by far the most important driver of philanthropy, and this is really worth understanding. This year, and this number is lower than last year, the United States citizens gave $230 billion in individual donations. That means that the Gates Foundation, with all of its headlines, is going to take 50 years to give away 1/6 of what we as individuals give away every year. So it's actually the checks that individuals write that matter. Much more important than corporate philanthropy, much more important than the big foundations. That means the power's in our hands. So what do U.S. citizens do? And U.S. citizens, by the way, are by far the most philanthropic in the world, also probably due to our tax structure. Of the $230 billion, 8% went to basic needs. And that's true in 2009, which is a very serious recession year for our country. 8% went to food, shelter, or basic necessities. I commissioned this study when I was at google.org, and if you are as generous as you could be, everything that might be going to the poor you can count another 23% that goes to the poor in any way, shape, or form. That means that the very most generous estimate says that less than 1/3 of our philanthropy goes to help the needy. So then the question is obvious, where do people give? For poorer families, families that make less than $100,000 a year, 2/3 of their giving goes to religious institutions, the institutions they frequent. And studies show, and I really believe, that when people donate to their church, they donate to their synagogue, they're often thinking about the church food drive, the synagogue food drive. But less than 20 cents on the dollar goes outside of those institution walls. Almost all of that money supports those institutions. And that doesn't mean that those institutions aren't important. They're important to all of us. It just means that that's philanthropy, not charity. It's not all of those dollars going to help the poor. For wealthier families, families that make over $100,000 or more than half their giving goes to two things: educational institutions and health institutions. Overwhelmingly, institutions that are in their community that they attend, that they frequent, or that they are the alumni of. Of those dollars, in education, 9 cents of the dollar goes to scholarships, and in healthcare, 10 cents of the dollar goes to programs targeted at the needy. We surveyed this when I was at Google, and we asked lots of people in what was a very rigorous study, and we said, when you donate to schools, why are you donating? And the answer comes back time and time again: so that there can be scholarships at my schools, so that everyone can afford to attend. 9 cents of your dollar. I said this, to my alma mater. I am not a big donor to my schools. Health institutions, it's 10 cents of the dollar. But when you survey people, they will say they're giving so that their hospitals are open to everyone. In 1889, Andrew Carnegie wrote that growing inequality was an inescapable byproduct of capitalism, and therefore the wealthy had an obligation to devote their fortunes to helping reduce this inequality. He argued that the man who dies rich dies disgraced. Since 1889, things have gotten worse, not better. The top 500 people in the world have more wealth than the bottom 400 million. I'm going to say that again. Top 500 compared to 400 million. The top 10% of families in the country own 85% of global wealth. The bottom 50% own 1%. Inequality in our day of technology, in our day of globalization, is getting worse, not better. Given all this, U.S. citizens, $230 billion a year, estimates range from 1% to 4% goes outside the country. And that's to support anything outside the country, let alone programs to help the world's poor. I think as philanthropists, we need to focus on charity. I think we should support our institutions. I personally support our Jewish institutions and other institutions. It's really important we do so. It's vital for our children. It's vital for our homes. But I don't count it as charity. And when I add up my donations, my family's donations at the end of the year, if I have an aim of giving 10%, the stuff that goes to my kids' schools, I don't put it in that bucket. If, like great businesses, we as philanthropists are going to focus on the most pressing need, remind ourselves that today, this year, 1 in 8 Americans has sought emergency food assistance. That number has skyrocketed in the last 2 years. And I saw a recent article and commentary saying that's true for Jews as well. And remember that there are 2.7 billion people who live lives that are short and hard in ways that we could never imagine. Are we willing to either give more so that we can support all the things we're supporting now and help these people? Or are we willing to make the hard choices and give a little less to our own kids' school and a little more to someone who's going to starve? Number 2, great businesses find systemic solutions. What economists call visible victims and immediate crises attract a lot of attention. I think all of us are riveted on Haiti. The numbers, it'll be months before anyone figures out exactly what happens, but the latest estimates say that between 200 and 270,000 people are going to have been killed in the tragedy, with another couple 100,000 completely displaced, and an entire society in disarray. This is a crisis worth paying attention to. In 2004, in the tsunami, 225,000 people were killed. I, like everyone else here, we were riveted to CNN as we watched those huge waves crash over living people. In the wake of the tsunami, $6 billion was raised. 45% of Americans gave to the tsunami. Now remember that every year between 1% and 4% of Americans give overseas, so 45% reached into their pockets to help, and that's something that I applaud. But I also want to remind us that these are the visible victims. 225,000 people died in the tsunami, probably something like the same amount in Haiti. Every 6 weeks in this world, that many children die of infectious disease caused by unclean water. A problem that we have the technology to solve, we're just not willing to fund it. This is wells that can be drilled in villages. We know how to do this. Every 6 weeks, that many people in this world starve. Given that the big health crisis the developed world faces is one of obesity, we should take particular note. In the 6 weeks following the tsunami, donations to the UN World Food Program went down by 20%. The world rushes to the visible victim. How do we focus on the systemic solutions? And remember, Haiti's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that happens every 2 weeks in this world. That's how many people die of things we could prevent. It feels good to give to something specific and measurable. I'm on the board of several nonprofits, and we know what everyone knows about fundraising. When you do the aggregate numbers, it's too hard to respond. When I stand up here and say 2.7 billion people, impossible to contemplate, and it makes us feel powerless. How do I dig into my pockets to help 2.7 billion people? But the Save the Children model, nothing against that organization, I'm a supporter of theirs. The Save the Children model, where I identify one boy or one girl and I say, give us $20 a month to help that person, that feels good. That feels doable. People dig into their pockets for the visible victim. So good philanthropists and good fundraisers take the invisible and make it visible by making it personal. Business has had a lot to say about philanthropy, and we all want to be great business people and rigorous as we approach philanthropy. And what that means is that we all talk about metrics and measurable results. And our philanthropic organizations run around telling us, you give us X dollars, we do Y with it. Here's the problem. Yes, you can pay $20 a month and feed a child, but if that child does not have access to clean water, it doesn't matter that they get food, they will not gain weight. And they will not have a better life anyway. And in order to make that money work, to make that food that you are providing through Save the Children, that town needs infrastructure and a clean water system and roads. And we need a world that's for free trade so people in Africa can actually make goods that we will actually buy rather than protecting our old jobs. The problem with this is that these are the systemic solutions and they're harder to measure. Therefore, they're harder to do. Good businesses tell everyone to measure their results. Great businesses go for the systemic solution. They try to find measurement, but they know that sometimes measuring something specific can be worse rather than better. I talk about this a lot at work. I find it really interesting as a manager that if you give a group of people, or even myself, a clear metric-based target, they will run towards it almost without seeing anything else. The problem is that you give people something measurable they can control, you're almost always optimizing a subsystem rather than optimizing the main system. And this is the analogy I use to tell the story. You have a soccer team, and the soccer team is run by a great business leader, so the soccer team gets bonus based on whether they win games. We're a meritocracy in our company and our soccer team, and our soccer team gets paid more when it wins the games. Sounds pretty good? We've all done this? Meritocracy as we run our businesses. Then you hire someone like me who's gone to business school, and I say, wait, we can't bonus the soccer team on winning the games because the soccer team doesn't do that. You can only bonus people on what they specifically control. So I'm going to bonus the offense on scoring goals and the defense on defending against goals. Sounds better, right? Now everyone can actually control their destiny. What's the problem with that? The problem is that I now have an offense which would rather lose a game 10-15 than win a game 3-2. I've given them something measurable that they can control, and they will run towards it. But I haven't focused on a systemic solution. If we are going to be truly great philanthropists, we're not going to blindly insist that things get measured. We're not going to look only to the visible victim. We're going to watch the news tonight, look at Haiti, and remember that there are kids in Africa who are starving and dying. We're not going to only give to organizations which solve problems that can be broken into chunks we can understand and feel good about. We're going to focus on the big stuff. The big stuff. Free trade, no one's for it. I'm a Democrat. The Republicans are better on this, but even they're terrible. No one stands for free trade right now in our country. If you care about the world's poor, you have to care about free trade, because if we don't let people make things that the world's markets can buy, they can never develop. We need to be for aid. The Global Fund, which works on AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis, which puts out these numbers, in the latest budget round, their budget was slashed by the US Congress, along with the rest of the world. How many calls are we going to make to Congress on that? We need to care about good governance, and we need to support organizations that are going to do the heavy lifting of finding the systemic solutions that are going to build infrastructure, not just feed an individual child. Like great businesses, as great philanthropists, we're going to look for the systemic solution. Third thing businesses do, build core competence. I've worked in the Valley for 8.5 years, 6.5 at Google and 2 years at Facebook, and I've always had a sales job. And in each and every quarter, I've reported earnings to private boards and to public companies, to Wall Street. Not a single time when I've reported our revenue has anyone looked at me and said, "You're overhead." But I'm overhead. I am administrative overhead at Facebook. I was administrative overhead at Google, and all the people who work for me are administrative overhead. And what's so important about this is that great businesses build great core competencies. And what we call core competence, what we call management excellence, what we call organizational capacity in the for-profit world, we call administrative overhead in our nonprofits and tell them to minimize it. So what do nonprofits do? They don't build up the basics. Now, I'm not arguing to go back to the days of the 1950s where 60% of the budgets were going to the salaries of the people working there. I'm not saying we should pay no attention to this. I think we're paying too much attention to this because it is really important if we're going to build philanthropic institutions, nonprofits that can answer really big thorny problems. They need to be capable institutions. We need to pay those leaders well. We need to give them the freedom. Of all of the money people give, and this includes foundations and corporate foundations, 14% of total grant dollars are unrestricted. I think it's the test of whether or not you believe in an organization, whether or not you're willing to write an unrestricted check. My husband and I write no restricted checks ever. If we're not willing to hand an organization our money and say we support your mission and we believe that you know best how to do this, we don't write it. As people who are supporting philanthropic organizations, can we write more unrestricted checks? Spend less time telling people to minimize their overhead and more time telling people to build institutions that are great enough to tackle the invisible victim, great enough to focus on the core competence. It's also a fact in philanthropy that everyone wants to be the leverer, no one wants to be the leveree, and it's a huge problem. I worked on the board of a nonprofit or charter school, which was building charter schools serving low-income kids in our area. And if we wanted to raise money to open a school, no problem. 3 weeks, enough of us could make enough phone calls, and we could raise millions of dollars to open a new school. Once that school was opened and ongoing, try raising $200,000 to keep that school's art department opened, virtually impossible. Everyone wants to start, no one wants to continue. The Gates Foundation does the same thing. Largest foundation in the world, they give grants and they do it for the first couple years and then they say go find funding elsewhere. Everyone wants to lever. The problem is that the truly great philanthropic organizations cannot be for profits. The movement that says that all of our philanthropic organizations, we should all be social entrepreneurs, I am telling you, we cannot get kids in Marin County into charter schools, 90% free lunch. There's nothing for that school to sell. They need to stay a nonprofit. And so we need to be willing to write unrestricted checks, and we need to be willing to write checks to organizations that already exist that are going to need funding for now and forever, because those are the organizations that are going to work on poverty and solve the really big problems. I think it's an accident of birth that I am here today. No matter how hard I've worked, and sure I've worked hard, nothing makes up for the fact that I was born to my amazing parents in North Miami Beach, Florida. Any of you who have a chance to meet my parents this morning, you will know that a child born into my family had roughly 100% chance of attending college. They wanted to live till their 19th birthday. A child born into sub-Saharan Africa has a 1 in 6 chance of not seeing their 5th birthday. I'm not proud of the things I've accomplished. I don't think I've earned it. I think I was mostly lucky. As a Jew, I'm discontent. I'm discontent in the inequality I see in the world. I'm discontent with myself that I don't do more. Because coming and speaking to this breakfast, that's not enough. I should be doing more. This community, the JCF, is an incredible community, an incredibly strong community of dedicated Jews. I am awed and inspired by the example Jim Koshland has set for me and my husband, someone we've admired for a very long time and try to model ourselves after. I admire so much of the work this group does. And we as a community have tremendous capacity to give. This year alone, the JCF raised $24 million and dispersed $154 million. And I think we should ask ourselves the harder questions about where that money went and how much of it went to the hardest problems and the systemic solutions, and to build great capacity for nonprofits that are going to solve these problems. In the era of Facebook, we see the victims and we know their plight. It is incumbent upon us as Jews, incumbent upon us as human beings to do more, to make the world a little bit more just, to not get overwhelmed by the numbers in the billions, but say, if I can feed someone today, or if I can help build a well that provides the water that enables someone else to feed them who doesn't understand this, and then enables that child to actually gain weight with that food, I'm going to be the one to do that. As Jews, we must leverage our discontent to perform true tzedakah, make the world more just. Thank you for your dedication to our community. Thank you for having me here today, and I'm happy to take questions on Facebook or any of this. So I know I chose to speak about philanthropy, and there may be lots of Facebook questions, so totally open Q&A. It can be on absolutely anything you want to talk about. It doesn't have to be a question also. Feel free to make comments. I'm sure we can all learn from so many people in the room.
Questions?
This is the part where someone should say something, otherwise I'm kind of standing up here. Yeah, thank you.
Sheryl, how do you think there's a movement afoot among nonprofits to try to leverage Web 2.0 and social networking? Can you talk to that a little bit and how best to go about that for nonprofits?
Yeah, I think it's really important that, that all organizations and nonprofits take advantage of what is basically the free distribution of information. There's a lot that we used to have to pay to do, buy lists, send out mailings, that we can do for free on the web, and it's really good to do it. I'm asked this question a lot, and my single best piece of advice, hire some college interns or a couple kids out of college. Jeff Sachs' organization had called me a couple months ago, and they do great things, and they had put together a whole committee of like all the senior people in Silicon Valley, and I was on it, and all my friends were on it, and I got on the phone with them, and I said, this is great. You got like, every big name, myself not included, in Silicon Valley on your list. Can I tell you what you should do instead? Go hire 3 kids from college this summer. They will just not talk about it. They're going to go put up a Facebook page, put up a Facebook group, put up a channel on YouTube. Most of the stuff is actually really easy, and the mistake not just nonprofits make, but businesses make, is they try to plan it out too far. They try to actually be too strategic. If you look at how the web works, there's incredibly fast information return. So the best way to figure out what to do is put up a Facebook page, post stuff on YouTube, put stuff up on your own website, and then see what happens and turn to respond. The other thing I would say is a lot of organizations, and this, by the way, is not just nonprofits, it's businesses, have not realized that the web has fundamentally moved from like 2006, 2007 to 2010. And Libby, who's here with me today from Facebook, and I have been spending a lot of time working on this, which is that the thing that's changed on the web is people used to poke around via Yahoo directories and then Google search and spend a lot of time going to websites. Because of Facebook and the advent of feeds, which basically bring information to you, people spend less and less time going to places on the web and more time looking at information that comes to them through places like Facebook. We now have our average user at Facebook spend 7 hours a month with us. The second highest is Yahoo, it's under 3 hours, and the third highest is Google, it's at 2. So people are spending much more time on places like Facebook than Yahoo and Google. And the reason is that people are fundamentally lazy. On Yahoo and Google, I need to poke around and go where I want to go. But on Facebook, I just identify who my friends are, and all the information comes to me. If any of you are users, you can see this. So the other advice I have for nonprofits, other than stop thinking too hard and hire some college kids to put some stuff up, is go to where your people are. Nonprofits and businesses spend much too much time on their own websites. And like not so many people come to your own websites. That's okay, because like not so many people come to like big company websites anymore either. People don't move around the web as much. Information is coming to them. So my advice is figure out what you're trying to do and who you're trying to connect with. Hire some young kids who can do it. Put the messages out there and go to where people are and just keep iterating and learning.
Hi. Change the subject a little bit. Talk to us about China. I know that
I was waiting. I wait for how long this question takes whenever I speak publicly.
Facebook has had its travails. Google made a move and was sort of universally shunned by the corporate community, including in Silicon Valley. Where do you stand with that, both in terms of Facebook, but also personally in your perspective on China?
God, I have a lot to say on this. I'll try to keep it quick. I think China is one of the hardest issues we face as business people. So from a very personal point of view, I'm really torn. I started my career, my first job, I worked in India on leprosy, as Hildy mentioned. And if you look at China versus India, and you look at development, you would have much rather been in China over the last 20 years. There's no question. With all of its human rights abuses, you are more likely to live past the age of 5, eat. I mean, the China economic development is huge. And since I have a strong view that the fundamental problem, that is the most critical problem people face, is abject poverty, how do I feel about a system that does not provide human rights? As a Jew, I know what oppression means. As an American, I care tremendously about democracy. As a person who knows what I feel like on Yom Kippur when I fast and can't imagine starving every day, how do I feel about China? China has done a tremendous job lifting people out of poverty. The world's never seen anything like it. It is amazing. And it has helped people, and it is important. On the other hand, their standard for human rights is not mine, so I'm deeply conflicted, and I have no easy answers. That's my personal view. But I also recognize that if I could have been born in India in poverty 20 years ago or China, I'd rather be born in China. And that's worth really understanding. Business. When businesses, and I was part of the Google, I hired a lot of the people in China. When businesses make a choice to go into China, they make the same choice you make going into any country, which is you abide by that country's laws. We do it everywhere. There are different laws for content everywhere in the world, and when you work in a country, you abide by their laws. With most of the places that are commercially important, that's not hard, because a lot of the places that have extremely bad policies on human rights, there's no business in North Korea. No one's struggling with this. The place people struggle is China. That's why it represents this struggle. When you go into China as a business, you make a couple of compromises, and you make them knowing it. Google knew it. Everyone who goes into business knows it in China. And this is what you do. One, you censor. You know that you cannot provide all information. The second is that you know you can be asked to turn over personally identifiable information to that government. We're asked to do it here. The U.S. government subpoenas companies for information they need when they're looking into a possible terrorist threat. Like all internet companies, what we did at Google, what we do at Facebook, is we look at those subpoenas really carefully. We don't even give information to all of them, but when legally required and important for national security, information's turned over. That's abiding by U.S. law. It's actually the same law in China. The problem is that while here we feel like we have a very legitimate government asking us for information for very legitimate reasons, in China, they have a government who's asking for the same information for something we may not believe in, but everyone does it. When Yahoo turned over that reporter's information, that was part of doing business. So when Google went into China, Google knew this, and it was a very uncomfortable place for Google to be. You could see it. You could see it in the public comments the founders were making. No one was comfortable. What happened since then is that there were, everyone knows what happened, but there were things that happened that Google found it very difficult to continue working in China. And Google hasn't, I don't think they've quite publicly done this, but it just looks from the outside, and I'm on the outside now, like they're pulling out. I think that's a complicated decision too. There are hundreds of people, I hired some of them there, and this is not going to be good for those people. This is a hard decision. I think Google's clearly struggling with it, and I think, they're doing a good job going through a lot of things. At Facebook, we face all of this and we genuinely don't know what to do. We are blocked in China. The government last June, along with Twitter and the other social networking, just put down the curtain and we are blocked. And we saw that because we had a lot of users and then we had none. So overnight, it wasn't that hard to figure out what happened. We don't know what to do, so we haven't done anything yet. That's kind of where we are. We're growing so quickly and so much to do all over the world, we don't really have the resources to do anything anyway. And so it's not an imminent decision, but it's obviously a decision we're going to have to make as a business. It's a huge percentage of the world's population. And we believe the tools we do and we make are really important, that they're important for democratic movements everywhere. So we don't know. And I think it's fair to say that all the businesses that are American that are working there are struggling.
Is there anything the Chinese have asked you to do that would unblock you?
You know, they blocked us. We've never talked to anyone. I mean, they blocked us. They've never called us. We've never called them. We go on with life. They go on with life. There's been no official contact. So.
Hi, thanks for coming. Google.org was founded on the Salesforce Foundation model, which is just a wonderful 1-1-1 model. When are we going to see Facebook.org?
So Google.org was found, I worked on the founding. We founded it after we went public, I want to say like 4 years ago, when we had the resources to do it. At Facebook, we're not there yet. We do a lot of work for nonprofits. It's funny, I was talking to someone from Salesforce and they were saying, you know, you should do what Salesforce does and make your product available for free to nonprofits. And I was like, our product's free. There is something interesting about that it is a lot of people when they have companies make their, I actually had a fight with this guy at Davos about it. He's like, you should do it for nonprofits. I'm like, it's free. Like, you should give it to nonprofits for free. I'm like, it's free for everyone. You should let nonprofits do what businesses do. I'm like, they can. You know? So our product is entirely free, basically. There's nothing that a nonprofit can't do that a business can't do. And we actually have small numbers of resources to actually specifically help nonprofits, and we try to put out a lot of information to help nonprofits use the product. I started my career thinking I would never work in a for-profit company, that for-profit companies were kind of evil, and I worked at places like the World Bank and the Treasury. And then I went to Google because I believed the product itself was good for the world, and that's also why I work at Facebook. I work in a for-profit company, and you know that was something I had to think long and hard of, but the product that we put out itself I think is really good. We've been a tremendous force for a lot of things that have happened for democracy and for freedom. When Haiti happened, we had 1,500 status updates a minute about Haiti. And while I personally wish we could get to 1,500 status updates a minute on malaria, I'm still proud that we're providing a product that when people want to get involved in the philanthropic community, they can do it. So.
Hi, thanks for coming. We talked about China blocking Facebook. You know, we're business leaders here. What about companies that block Facebook, that block their employees from going on, that don't necessarily understand the importance of social networking? What would you say to a CEO or a CTO at an organization that blocks its employees from social networking?
I'm asked this a lot. You know, my answer is people are using it on their BlackBerries and iPhones anyway, so why bother? Not something we feel tremendously strongly about. I think companies that don't block it find that it's pretty useful. That while you can't conduct your, most sensitive business and attach your accounts through a CRM system to Facebook, when employees use it at work, it's really useful. I mean, at Facebook, we're huge users of our own product, and we use it the same way any other company could use it to communicate with each other. So I think at worst, it's kind of counterproductive because it's a good tool. At best, it's futile because everyone's using it on their mobile devices anyway. So.
As a manager, I love using it at work because it enables me to see who has a lot of extra time when I look at their updates. But anyway, that's not my question. My question is more about as a company grows like Facebook and Google, innovation becomes much more challenging. What do you think maybe the top 1, 2, or 3 things are to maintain a culture of successful innovation as you grow bigger?
Yeah, it's something we think a lot about. We thought a lot about at Google. We think a lot about Facebook. A couple of things. Keep people in small teams. If you're in a team that's too big, it's really hard to be innovative because you kind of wind up formalizing your processes. So at Google and at Facebook, even more so, we keep our groups in very small teams. And if tasks are complicated, we break them down so that there are small teams you feel like you can make a big difference. The second is make sure you run a system where the best ideas come from the bottom, not the top. And that means being really non-hierarchical. Mark Zuckerberg and I, we sit together. We don't have offices. We don't even have cubes. We sit in the same open floor plan as everyone. We actually sit in the center and gave ourselves the worst office space there. We sit in the middle just like everyone else. Make it really non-hierarchical. Make it really easy for people to approach you. The days of the kind of corporate dining room and the special parking, they don't exist out here as far as I can tell in the companies that really do great work. The other thing is make it okay for people to fail. If you want people to innovate and take risks, you have to applaud the failures. The best thing I ever saw on this was a woman named Kim Scott who worked with me at Google, who I had hired, and she had this big monkey she called Oops the Monkey. And she had a team meeting. She had a team of about 100 people, and they had one weekly meeting. And as part of that meeting, she would say, okay, who made the biggest mistake this week? And people would stand up and say their mistake and say how big it was, and whoever made the biggest mistake by applause would get Oops the Monkey to sit on their desk all week. And joking aside, I thought it was quite brilliant. Talk about making it safe to fail. This was a public celebration of mistakes, and the ones she celebrated were the ones where someone was going out on a limb to try to get something wrong. One of the most important things Larry Page ever told me is I had made a fairly big mistake, and I was feeling bad about it and apologizing to him. And he looked at me and said, I'd so much rather you make this type of mistake. As long as the mistakes you make are those of moving too fast, doing too much, and not necessarily having all the controls, great. I'll be upset with you, Sheryl, when the mistakes you make of those are being too conservative. And that was a really important lesson I try to emulate.
Hey, we have a question from the back channel, people asking in the chat room. What does Facebook think about all the anti-Israel and hate groups that are on Facebook?
So 400 million people on Facebook. 3 billion pieces of content are published on Facebook every single week. So we don't look at them, see them, know they're there. So the first thing is that lots of stuff is on Facebook we're unaware of. When we become aware of it, we have a very firm policy against hate, and we take things that are hate or inciting violence down. As with all content, we try to be as non-restrictive as possible. We believe that it's a freedom, that it's an ability to express itself. There's lots of stuff expressed on Facebook that I don't agree with, and that's okay. But when it goes over into the realm of extreme hate, it's against our policies and we take it down. It's quite possible to see that stuff before we take it down, because the way we figure out it's on there is someone tells us. Our users inform us, hey, I saw this, can you look at this and take it down? And that's how we take it down. There's no other way to run something this big.
Hi there. Again, thanks for coming. Quick question, as successful as Facebook has been, even more amazingly successful is the growth of social gaming and user engagement around that and mashing up game mechanics and your friends. Could you talk a little bit about that, your vision of how games are driving the social experience and how you personally manage? I'm sure what you have is tons of friends. How you manage all the updates and stuff and how you stay focused, not overwhelmed with your Facebook relationships.
So I think gaming is really interesting. It's a really important industry right now for Silicon Valley. And I think what's important about it is that the trends in gaming are following the same trends we see in communication in general. So when Facebook first did its status update, you know that bar at the top which says, what are you doing right now? I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago. People said, who cares? Why would I post, what am I doing right now? You know, Sheryl Sandberg is at Starbucks having a cup of coffee. Like, who cares, right? That it was conceived of that anything important you had to say took more than one line of text, and it wouldn't be immediate. But it turned out that a lot of people care, that you can actually communicate quite important things by communicating in short, immediate bits of information. If you look at the gaming industry, the traditional gaming companies, and they build great games, the World of Warcrafts, the Activisions, the EAs of the world, they build games the way people, I think, make movies. They're very immersive experiences. They're highly produced. They draw you in and they keep you there for a long period of time. And those games are really important, and people still play them all over the world, and those are industries that are still growing. What's growing faster are something that looks like games and feels like games, but rather they're very short interactions. So Farmville, which has 230 million users, you don't have to go play Farmville for an hour or half an hour. You can play for 30 seconds, and then you come back out, and it's very social. And so what we've seen is that people have gone from writing, big papers they published as internet sites, to writing blogs, which were faster and shorter, to writing posts, which are even shorter, more immediate, and more social. And that's what's happening with games. They've gone from being very immersive to the immersive ones are still there. And by the way, people still write articles and write blogs, but there's just more activity of this very immediate, short, hypersocial thing. And that's what we believe is happening in the world. We believe that people, if they can communicate something really fast, will do it more frequently, and you don't always have time to sit down and write something long. So we believe in that, and that the trend in gaming follows this. How I manage all my friends on Facebook, and I do have a lot, friend lists. We have them. Not a lot of people use them, but they're very useful. I organize them into friend lists so that I can share with the people I want to share, and also see the updates from the people I most want to see most frequently.
Question. Facebook has 400 million users and it's free. How do you make your money? Is it through volume? Seriously, how are you monetizing today, and how do you expect it to change over the future?
There was that great, everyone remember the old Saturday Night Live thing on the World Change Bank? Here at the World Change Bank, you give us $1, we won't give you 100 pennies unless you want that, How do we make our money? Volume, sheer volume? Yeah. No, we're not doing that. It's not a lot of free things. We make our money primarily through advertising. We're actually a really important advertising platform. As businesses learn that you have to go to where your consumers are, go to where your customers are, not have your customers come to you, they're increasingly putting more and more of their activity onto Facebook pages and through Facebook. So we're a really powerful tool for businesses to do everything from roll out products to get their communities engaged, to have real engagement with users. And so our advertising business has been growing quite nicely. So we have no plans to charge users. Every time I say that, I get quoted broadly, which I think is weird. We haven't tried to charge anyone.
As a rabbi in the community, I'm interested in change. Victor Hugo once referred to gradualism, which is a very slow change. I think that's what most people, or how most people see religious institutions. So as somebody who's involved in synagogue, religious life, what would you like to see us do to kind of bring us into the 21st century?
I don't know. I belong to Temple Beth Jacob down in Silicon Valley, and it's a great community. I actually quite like that when I go there, my BlackBerry stays home and, no one sends me any updates. I actually really enjoy it. So I guess from my point of view, living in this world, I don't want to see that. But I guess I would say the same principles apply. Figure out what the people in your community are doing and go to them, make it part of their world as much as you bring it into your own. I think we're out of time. Thank you again for your time this morning.
No, it's okay. I can't find it, so it's in here somewhere. I think that's what I think about.